Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WIDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, and I'm so glad that you've joined us this morning. We have a lot of breaking news, not just at the federal level, but also at the New York State level. Some local issues hopefully we can get to as well. Let's jump right into it. And I hope that you'll be a part of the program this morning. You see the number on the bottom of the screen. You can feel free to text at any time or leave a voicemail, and we'll do the best we can to get to your comments. First off, breaking last night, a federal judge has allowed Trump to push forward with his buyouts for the government workers. U.S. District Judge George O'Toole ruled that the union groups suing to block the so-called deferred resignation program lacks standing and that his Massachusetts-based court lacked the jurisdiction to proceed with the lawsuit. This is a big win for Trump and his goal of shrinking the size of the government. O'Toole, interestingly enough, an appointee of former President Bill Clinton, temporarily blocked the Office of Personnel Management from moving ahead with the program earlier in the week after unions representing more than 800,000 federal workers charged that the buyout offers were unlawful. The judge ruled, quote, "The plaintiffs here are not directly impacted by the directive. Instead, they allege that the directive subjects them to upstream effects, including a diversion of resources to answer members' questions about the directive, a potential loss of membership, and possible reputational harm. The unions do not have the required direct stake in the fork directive, but are challenging a policy that affects others, specifically executive branch employees. This is not sufficient." OPM has given some 2 million federal workers unwilling to comply with the return to office mandate a February 6th deadline to accept about 8 months of pay and benefits in exchange for their resignations. What's interesting is, if you recall, before Trump was sworn in, but I believe it was the gap after he won, before he was sworn in, where Elon Musk was talking about this being an option. And of course, they put it on the table. I think it's a fair option. Musk saying at the time, and I'm paraphrasing, that, we're not doing this in a malicious way. This is with sort of respect, and that's why we would give a buyout. And many accepted that buyout. About 75,000 federal workers have accepted the deal. They did not want to return to the office, and I can understand a little bit of that if you have not ever worked in the office since COVID. Imagine that. Imagine that was still on the table. You also have, of course, a hybrid where some people are working from home and going into the office, no longer acceptable under the Trump administration, and they were offered, I think, a very generous buyout of nearly 8 months' pay. According to OPM spokeswoman McLaurin Pinover, OPM is pleased the court has rejected a desperate effort to strike down the deferred resignation program. There is no longer any doubt the deferred resignation program was both legal and a valuable option for federal employees. This program was carefully designed, thoroughly vetted, and provides generous benefits so federal workers can plan for their futures. So this is a major ruling, and will have important implications for some of the other plans by DOGE and the Trump administration. We're going to talk about what the media has been saying about Musk and Trump. We'll be talking about that later. Also, some plans to cut even more, obviously, in government waste. That'll be coming up a little bit later on in the program. But breaking last night, if you did not stay up late, that the federal judge did allow Trump to push forward with the buyouts for around 75,000 government workers who accepted that deal that they did not want to return to office. Also yesterday, in very big news, the Senate confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Intelligence, and we'll give you kind of a timeline on some of the other cabinet officials. But the Senate confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as President Trump's spy chief, elevating the privacy hawk to a cabinet-level position in the Republican administration. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat representative. The upper chamber voted 52 to 48. And by now, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, by now you've probably heard that Senator Mitch McConnell joined in with all 47 Democrats in opposition to Tulsi Gabbard. Mitch McConnell has consistently, whether it's through interviews, and I have an op-ed here in just a moment I'm gonna bring to you, has tried to be somewhat of a fly in the ointment for Trump, or be critical of Trump. The Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel's assent to serve as principal advisor to Trump on intelligence gathered by 18 separate agencies comes after combative hearings in the Senate. You are aware of that. We all watched that and enjoyed some of her responses, just like Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi may have been one of my favorite confirmation hearings thus far, just because of the shock and surprise on Adam Schiff's face when she did not just yes, sir, no, sir type thing. But Tulsi Gabbard doing a good job as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard. Some people skeptical at first. What I like, and I can't remember who said it. I believe it was J.D. Vance. But I thought whoever said it raised a very good point, which was a lot of people decided to vote for Trump. And I will say anecdotally, I knew people that wanted to vote for Trump, not because they liked Trump. As a matter of fact, were kind of opposed to Trump, but they saw both Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard move to the MAGA movement and said, well, this maybe is no longer about R or D. This may really be about making America great again. So in kind of an olive branch to those voters that, again, maybe held their nose voting for Trump, but like the bigger overall picture of all this, this saying to them, well, thank you for your support, and we're with you. These people supported the movement quite early on in the campaign, shortened the campaign. So I thought that was a good point, and I think that's an exciting aspect to this. Tom Cotton said, I think it's fair to say that Ms. Gabbard's nomination has generated a bit more interest and attention than do most nominees. Cotton emphasized that he had combed through multiple FBI background checks, questionnaires, and other documents and found Gabbard's record was clean as a whistle before accusing Democrats of questioning her patriotism and judgment. Ex-Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has even smeared her as a Russian asset, Cotton noted. Now, Mitch McConnell said, entrusting the coordination of the intelligence community to someone who struggles to acknowledge these facts is an unnecessary risk. And that was in reference to Edward Snowden and some comments made about Vladimir Putin and his invasion of Ukraine. So in empowering a DNI who only acknowledged the value of critical intelligence collection authorities when her nomination appeared to be in jeopardy, McConnell added. So why do I mention McConnell? And, well, first of all, McConnell had a piece out, and I'm going to give you some other comments on her being accepted for national intelligence. Mitch McConnell wrote a piece, an op-ed. Now, he's been struggling with some health issues, and people are really concerned. He fell a couple times recently. Now he's been in a wheelchair. They say as a precaution, but looking as to struggling to get out of the wheelchair, there has been some concern in that. We know that there was concerns, about a year ago, maybe two, where he was freezing up when speaking. Well, he wrote an op-ed where he said Kentuckians, because of course he's a senator from Kentucky, can't afford the high cost of Trump's tariffs. And he goes on, it's about 3 pages, to criticize Trump, suggesting that tariffs could cost the average Kentuckian $1,200 a year. So he finishes by saying, as the president and Republicans work to undo the damage of the last 4 years, we ought to strengthen our friendships abroad and reinforce our allies as pillars of American prosperity and security. At a time when Americans are tightening their belt, we would do well to avoid policies that heap on the pain. So Mitch McConnell has not been, well, he's very much falling in line with the old school Republican way of thinking, which is we want to do things the way they've always been done. Many were concerned, and it's very early in Trump's administration, many were concerned that the elected Republicans would take that stance and not pass a lot of the MAGA agenda, trying to be, again, a fly in the ointment, gum up the works. So Mitch McConnell been critical of the Trump administration, and therefore, for his reasons that I stated, did not support Tulsi Gabbard, though it did not matter because at the end of the day, it was 52-48. So Pete Hegseth thus far has been the most, if you're going to quote the media, the most controversial, because Pete Hegseth needed to call in J.D. Vance to break the tie at 50-50. What was interesting, a longtime ally of Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, voted against Tulsi Gabbard. He fell in line with the Democrats to vote against the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard. That's, and must be, Fetterman did as well. But what's interesting about Fetterman is at least sometimes he goes against the Democrat talking points and votes for one of Trump's nominees. In this case, Bernie Sanders, even though an ally to Tulsi Gabbard at one point, did not break reins. It says here that the then Hawaiian congresswoman, who had served as the DNC's vice chair since 2013, cut her 4-year term short in February of 2016, with a February 2016, endorsement of Sanders for president, citing her need to push back against more interventionist wars of regime changes. So an ally at one point to Bernie Sanders, though not supporting her rise to the national intelligence. Interesting. Also, and we're going to talk a lot about the media this morning. Sorry, looking at my time. If you want to have your blood boiling at almost 6:12 in the morning, this beautiful Thursday morning, we're going to give you some updates on the media or how they are twisting and using the talking points of the left in their criticism of the Trump administration. Here's one. MSNBC's Nicole Wallace on the show Deadline said, and I quote, Gabbard was confirmed by a vote of 52-48 with all 47 Democrats, as well as Mitch McConnell, voting against her. A little bit of irony for the man who used to control the Republican Party, now finding himself casting what is basically an ineffective dissent to oppose a nominee who Russia is cheering for within an hour of Gabbard's confirmation. Donald Trump announced that he and Vladimir Putin would immediately begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. And by the way, we're going to talk about that. But I do want to hear your opinion on Tulsi Gabbard. Good, bad, or indifferent. Because some I know in the past have been worried that Trump could pick people around him that maybe weren't for the movement. And some names were being thrown around. I don't actually believe Tulsi was one of them. But I would like to hear your thoughts. So former Senator Claire McCaskill interjected. This is again on MSNBC, saying, I can't tell you how disappointed I am in my former Republican colleagues, who many of whom know better. That kind of lecturing, that condescension that did not help in November by Democrats or by former Republicans or quote-unquote Republicans like the Liz Cheneys or the Claire McCaskills of the world. They should know better. Because you know who knows better? Claire McCaskill. This is very reminiscent of Jimmy Kimmel, if you recall, after the election, saying, I feel bad for you. Even though you voted for Trump, you don't know how bad it's going to be for you. So condescending. Again, not learning their lesson from November. She said, because Donald Trump won in a more convincing fashion than most people anticipated, because he won in spite of all the things he has done and shown the American people by his character and integrity, because their party, the base of their party, is enthralled with this man, some of the people I mentioned have elections coming up in states that they could easily be defeated in a primary by a pro-MAGA Republican. And Nicole Wallace said, so politics, which is what I thought, and that's just pathetic. It's like shining your shoes on the deck of the Titanic. Susan Collins wants to make sure her, heels don't get smudged as she's going down underwater. It's absolutely, I thought that was the reason. I wasn't sure, but that's sick. Oh, you thought politics was the reason. Okay. That they're every 6 years, so now again, they do the right thing for the country. I'm sure you are correct, but this is a tragedy. So it's pathetic. It's sick. I hope the Susan Collins of the world and the Republicans that are always a questionable vote, who are some, I'm drawing a blank on Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. I hope they learn their lesson in a way from coverage like this, that they can be praised by the media when they go against Republicans. But then as soon as they make a vote that Nicole Wallace disagrees with, calling pathetic and sick, then you're attacked, you're criticized, then you're no longer good for them. You're no longer useful. I think it's an important lesson that sometimes it takes some Republicans a little bit longer to learn. Some never learn, like the late John McCain, who was a maverick until he ran for president, and then they attacked him viciously. But we've got a couple other breaking stories from yesterday, and also a couple quick updates so you can mark your calendar or set your alarm if you want to find out when RFK Jr. will be voted on, and we'll have a little bit here about Kash Patel in just a second. But as you can tell, I'm running a little bit late, but I'm having a blast already, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. I'm so thankful that you've joined us this morning and grateful. Let's go to some comments from viewers. Good morning. Oh, this is from Steve. Hi, Steve. Good morning, Frank. Well, thank you. Good morning. A good question I would think people have overlooked. Why has the useless United Nations not made any statements about Trump's proposal about Gaza? That's a good point. Is it because they are just a money grab like Trump has tried to say in the past? Shouldn't what Trump wants to do with the Gaza Strip be something the UN could actually be a part of and oversee? Has the UN not said anything because they have Iran and Saudi Arabia on the Women's Rights Council, which is an oxymoron or oxymoron, however you want to pronounce it? That's a very good point. And that's why I think I'm so encouraged, and so many others, that Elise Stefanik, who is so dogged when it comes to getting to the bottom of what's right and wrong. Look at how she handled the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses. It's so nice that Elise Stefanik will be overseeing, or be the ambassador, I shouldn't say overseeing, but our ambassador to the United Nations. So I think there's going to be some changes. But that's a very good point, Steve. He also continues, Pam Bondi is suing New York for not following federal law. And Hochul is mocking Pam Bondi for it. Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a moment. We're going to lump in kind of the New York State issues. So yes, we will be talking about that. Steve asks Democrat viewers if they have the same principles towards protecting violent criminal aliens as Hochul has in her statement defending keeping and harboring illegal fugitives in New York State. Thank you for that. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. As far as tariffs, they will work because Trump wants made in America. Yes, we will pay more, but we will get it back and it will pour into our economy, not a foreign country. Thank you for that. We are going to talk about the New York State issue in just a moment. Quickly, the Senate is expected on Thursday to confirm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Health and Human Services Secretary. That is, again, today. The final showdown over Kennedy's controversial nomination was set in motion after the Republican-controlled Senate yesterday, and a 53-47 party line vote invoked cloture, which started the clock ticking towards the final confirmation roll call. It will be interesting. It's still not a guarantee, but that vote coming today. Keep an eye on that. And also Kash Patel's nomination to lead the FBI faces his first major Senate hurdle. The Senate Judiciary Committee is set to vote today on whether to advance Kash Patel's nomination for FBI director to the Senate floor after what could be defined as a fiery confirmation, to say the least. The vote is scheduled for 9 a.m. this morning. If Patel passes through committee, his nomination will be up for a full Senate vote. Democrats had successfully delayed Patel's committee vote, last week in an effort to force the Trump nominee to testify a second time. So there you are. There's an update. Again, Robert F. Kennedy doesn't say exactly what time the vote will be today for his confirmation. And then we've got the first hurdle for Kash Patel, which once it gets past committee, then it goes up to the full Senate vote. But today is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s full Senate vote. I hope I didn't word that in a way that made it more confusing than need be. Trump did speak to Putin and Zelensky yesterday about striking a deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump announced on a few posts on Truth Social, but also commented to reporters, I had just had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. We discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and various other subjects. Trump said he and Putin spoke about the benefit America and Russia will someday have in working together before noting he and Putin share a desire to end the war. Quote, first, as we both agreed, we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia-Ukraine. President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it. We also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiating immediately, and we will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, something which I'll be doing now. He did. We found out that he said he had a very positive call with Zelensky. The conversation went very well, he wrote. Like President Putin, wants to make peace. We discussed a variety of topics having to do with the war, but mostly the meeting that is being set up on Friday in Munich, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the delegation. I'm hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop the ridiculous war where there have been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction. God bless the people of Russia and Ukraine. First of all, how busy is Marco Rubio? Well, we've had 2 hostages freed this week. Every time you see... I know he's Secretary of State, but anytime you see any type of meeting, there he is in the background. Everybody in this administration, let me tell you, I'm sure they're not feeling bad for the federal employees who decided not to return to work and are taking that severance because working from home does not seem to be on the agenda for the people in the Trump administration and the Trump cabinet. Very busy. Now, John Bolton, who is no fan of Donald Trump, after everything, how that went down, John Bolton, Dennis Miller used to call him the nuclear walrus. I always got a kick out of that. Definitely very different opinion on international affairs and Trump and perhaps the way things are now. Bolton said, well, I don't have any expectations anymore. I think we know exactly what's going to happen. President Trump has effectively surrendered to Putin before the negotiations had begun. The position that Defense Secretary Hegseth announced in Brussels, which I'm sure I'd be stunned if Trump didn't convey them directly to Putin in their phone call, constitute terms of a settlement that could have been written in the Kremlin. Maybe they were written in the Kremlin and got out in a propaganda channel. But it's a complete reversal of the U.S. and NATO positions on a number of issues. For example, up until today, the official American position was that Ukraine should be returned to full sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's gone. The question of NATO membership as far back as 2008 has been that ultimately Ukraine would become a NATO member. That doesn't look like that's around anymore either. Putin has scored a whole series of victories today. Putin doesn't want to negotiate with Zelensky. He wants to negotiate with Trump because he thinks he'll get more out of him, and he's absolutely right. So your thoughts, that's John Bolton, your thoughts on that. Running late yet again. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Give them a call today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. A lot of comments coming in. We'll get to those in just a moment. I wanted to mention this before, and we are going to get to New York quickly this morning because as one viewer said, they hope Hochul gets locked up. Well, the DOJ announced the lawsuit against New York, Hochul, and Letitia James, over the sanctuary status. We're going to talk about that in just a second. 2 last quick breaking stories from yesterday so I can take a break, catch up on time. Israel is considering a substantial strike on Iran's nuclear facilities now that President Trump is in office and Joe Biden is out. That's according to a report citing U.S. intelligence agencies. A strike could come sometime this year, with Israeli leaders feeling Trump is far more likely to back an attack on Iran than Biden ever was. That seems pretty obvious, and that's being reported by the Wall Street Journal. The intelligence came from an assessment compiled by the Biden administration in the final days of its existence. The report explained that the balance of military risks has shifted in the Middle East after Iran's defenses had weakened following a year of war and proxy wars in the region, leaving it vulnerable. We've talked about the vulnerability of Iran on this program, but also the real fear of how close Iran is to having that nuclear weapon. So it's a very timely concern to have. They have been weakened by the wars and proxy wars. Israel's been talking for months about the need to hit Iran's nuclear sites, but Biden categorically ruled the option out while in office. So now you have a very different sheriff in town. Such attacks would likely require American munitions to be viable, and now that Trump is in office, Israeli leaders believe that they are far more likely to get the support. A follow-up report conducted in the early days of Trump's presidency reiterated that Israel's plans to conduct strikes stood, sources told the Wall Street Journal. The Trump administration entered a joint bombing operation with Israel against Iran's nuclear sites during the presidential transition, but Trump has largely opted to pursue diplomacy for now and has been outspoken about playing down rhetoric towards Tehran. Quote, reports that the United States, working in conjunction with Israel, is going to blow Iran into smithereens are greatly exaggerated. What a way to word that. In addition, that's from a truth post that Trump made. But according to the reports, Israel is plotting an attack on Iranian nuclear sites. And as we have mentioned in the past, they are very close to having the nuke, so it is time sensitive. Also, in breaking news, on a completely different level, everything else has been pretty much either international or the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard. Again, love to hear your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard and the job that you'll believe she'll do. Same with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Of course, it's not a sure thing, but that vote coming up today. But I received this press release yesterday. Melania Trump is excited to reopen the White House to public tours. This is just the beginning in Trump's second term. Public tours of the executive mansion paused as the 47th president transitioned into the Oval Office. While the White House tours will restart on February 25th, so if you're planning on going to Washington, you better call your representative now, your congressman or woman, depending on which part of the area you are viewing this program. The president and I are excited to reopen the White House to those interested in the extraordinary story of this iconic and beautiful landmark, she said in a statement. There's much to learn about the American presidency, the first families who have lived there, and our nation's rich history from a firsthand experience at the White House. This opportunity is unique among nations around the globe, a tradition we are honored to continue for the hundreds of thousands of visitors who come each year. Now, excuse me, the tours, which are free, and the tours are self-guided, but Secret Service agents obviously stationed along the routes, available for questions as well. The tours, which are free, typically last about 45 minutes and will generally be available from 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. I got a cough again, so I'm going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Let's go to some viewer comments. Mark writes, I think we will see more Democratic alignment with Trump. If not, they will be singled out as a money waster, and that is bad for future elections. Boy, so far the confirmation hearings haven't made it look that way, but I will remain cautiously optimistic. How's that, Mark? Also, I saw a clip of the Ithaca, New York mayor who said he would comply with ICE, but would not help them in any way. Yeah, I saw that as well. They reconfirmed, for lack of a better word, their sanctuary city status. There's been a lot on that. In general, really, no surprise, unfortunately. Comment from a different viewer. We pray they make an example out of Hochul, so when the first governor goes to federal prison, the rest will stop their illegal interference and insurrection. Well, let's talk about that. The Justice Department announced yesterday that it is, and this information came out pretty late, that it is suing New York State over its policy of limiting cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. And you heard with Sheriff Allard, when you get signed in, you agree not to give information to ICE. So if someone's arrested, that's the state rules. So you have the lawsuit focusing on Governor Kathy Hochul, State Attorney General Letitia James, and DMV Chief Mark Schroeder. This is a new DOJ, Bondi announced. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops, and it stops today. Oh, and it also sounds like Kristi Noem was able to claw back that, $58 million to the hotels in New York City for illegal migrants. We'll talk about that later on. Hopefully. I can tell by the show we are moving fast, and we're talking about a lot. As you know, we sued Illinois, Bondi said. New York didn't listen, so now you're next. The lawsuit, filed in the Northern District of New York and obtained by the New York Post, targeted the Empire State's green light law, which grants driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. The 2019 law also bars, this is important, inquiries into immigration status and bans the state DMV from sharing personal information with the feds and law enforcement unless ordered by a judge. Licensees are also alerted if a federal immigration agency requests their information. The complaint says the United States is currently facing a crisis of illegal immigration, and the federal government is set to put a stop to it. While states are welcome partners in that effort, it is a prerogative as separate sovereigns to refrain. But a state's freedom to stand aside is not a freedom to stand in the way. And where inaction crosses into obstruction, a state breaks the law. The state of New York is doing just that. It must be stopped. The filing added the DMV information is critical for federal immigration agencies to identify and remove those who are here illegally and to keep their officers safe. From vehicle stops to border crossings to executive arrests or to executing arrests and searches, immigration authorities depend on these records to assess real time the situation they face and the people they encounter. But New York's green light law deprives them of that insight and in turn unnecessarily forces brave law enforcement officers into danger in uncertain circumstances. Now, we're going to read Hochul's statement in a moment, but Letitia James fired back saying, "Our state laws, including the green light law, protect the rights of all New Yorkers and keep our community safe. I'm prepared to defend our laws just as I always have." Now, a source familiar to this situation told the New York Post that Hochul and Trump had tentatively agreed to meet next week when she was in Washington. We're going to talk about that as well in just a moment. Now, Bondi, on her first day in office, also froze all DOJ funding for 60 days to so-called sanctuary jurisdictions from New York to California. So they're going to be looking in to what is being done in the state, going after Hochul, going after Letitia James. And so the media is presenting this as retribution because of what Letitia James did to Trump. But this, of course, being based on immigration law. But Bondi ordered her department to not enter into any new contract, grant, or other agreement to provide federal funding to non-governmental organizations that support or provide services either directly or indirectly to removable or illegal aliens. The move comes as border czar Tom Homan ramps up immigration removal proceedings nationwide, kicking out 11,000 migrants targeted for having been charged or convicted of crimes. We've seen the videos of some being flown to Guantanamo. And I know that it's been stated Tom Homan is not very happy with Mayor Adams and how the enforcement is going thus far in New York City. So there is your update on, we've got more New York State updates, but there is a little bit of background on the DOJ announcing the lawsuit against New York, Hochul, and the state attorney general, Letitia James. We learned that, and this was kind of interesting, this was coming from the New York Times. We learned that Governor Hochul was scheduled to head to Washington today for a hastily arranged lunch at the White House with President Trump, according to a person familiar with the governor's plans, speaking on condition of anonymity. But she canceled the trip once Ms. Bondi announced her intention to sue Ms. Hochul and the state, the person said. Well, it's not just the state. It's important to note that it is Letitia James as well. This is coming at a time when there's already the negotiations when it comes to two things, perhaps more, congestion pricing in New York City that Donald Trump has said he wants to end, that it's a disaster. And I would say the media coverage of it anyway has proven that. And then you have Hochul now denying it, but trying to go again, showing she's not ready for prime time, thinking she's coming up with something brilliant, which is to delay the special election for Elise Stefanik's seat, and therefore creating a smaller majority for Trump as he tries to push forward with his agenda that was overwhelmingly supported by voters. So she was pushing that, thinking she came up with something brilliant. There was a lot of backlash. Many people believe that there could have been a phone call from Trump in these negotiations, and we know Hochul is not a very strong spined politician. She's not like her predecessor Cuomo, who would fight with anybody and anything. She is more willing to cave. So some have speculated that's perhaps why she gave up on that delay in the special election, not wanting to upset the apple cart as they negotiate and hoping that Trump won't end the congestion pricing. But their luncheon meeting was canceled because of this lawsuit. And this is the statement from Governor Kathy Hochul, who, again, remember, is up for re-election in 2026, though looks like she'll have a primary challenge and, of course, a Republican challenge. This is what she had to say. Earlier today, Attorney General Pam Bondi marched in front of the television cameras for a dramatic media briefing to announce she was filing charges against New York State related to our immigration law. Hours later, when legal papers were shared with reporters, we learned this was smoke and mirrors. The Department of Justice was filing a routine civil action about a law passed in 2019 that was being upheld by the courts, that has been upheld by the courts time and time again. I've got to say this is funny because this is the avenue that Governor Hochul went down, which is to try to suggest it was all media, it was all for press, it was all smoke and mirrors and for the camera. This is the same person that, along with Letitia James, after it was declared that Trump won re-election, won the second term is a way to word that, came out that day with a press conference to make sure that the world knew that New York State wasn't going to put up with Trump. And this is someone, and there may be a little jealousy here because Pam Bondi is doing this so great. That press conference was great. We see her at the confirmation hearings. Then, on the reverse side of that coin, think of the speech that Governor Hochul gave at the DNC, which had the flub right at the beginning, was awkward, not very charismatic. So maybe there's a level of jealousy here about how good of a job Pam Bondi does in front of the cameras and when the pressure is on as compared to how poorly Hochul does. And this is not to be insulting. She just doesn't have that political level in her. There's different kind of levels of politicians, and it seems the higher up you go, the better they are at public speaking and handling scenarios like this. She's just not ready, and that's why we say not ready for prime time so often. But for her to go down this avenue of criticizing Pam Bondi for having cameras there is laughable. Because remember, this is the same person. Well, never mind if you watch the State of the State with the production that they try to put on there. She really wants to be, quote unquote, as popular as Cuomo was during COVID, or she really wants to be a power maker, in the Democratic Party, and she just doesn't have it. Pelosi herself was blaming Governor Hochul for the loss in the midterms. So she's trying, and it resorts to a level of kind of pathetic at some points in how bad she wants that. But I'm going to continue because the statement's not over. Here are the facts. Our current laws allow federal immigration officials to access any DMV database with a judicial warrant. That's a common sense approach that most New Yorkers support. But there's no way I'm letting federal agents or Elon Musk's shadowy DOGE operation get unfettered access to the personal data of any New Yorker in the DMV system, like 16-year-old kids learning to drive and other vulnerable people. Okay. New York is proud that immigrants from across the globe come here searching for a better life. People like my grandparents who left Ireland looking for the American dream. We welcome law-abiding individuals who want to work, pay taxes, and contribute to our communities, while at the same time protecting the public safety of all New Yorkers by cracking down on violent criminals. Well, when was that done, or when is that going to be done? About cracking down on violent criminals, out of curiosity, Governor Hochul. But this is what she wants to be the takeaway, and it will be, because the media very much would support Hochul over Pam Bondi. This is the takeaway that they'll be using. Quote, "We expect Pam Bondi's worthless, publicity-driven lawsuit to be a total failure, just like all the others. Let me be clear, New York is not backing down." So here's Hochul acting tough. We'll see how tough she is when Carl Hasty or whoever goes after her on some issue in Albany and she backs down. But publicity-driven lawsuit. Publicity-driven would be a perfect definition for Governor Hochul as she looks to break into that next level, whatever that level will be. A little bit more on New York State when we come back, but you may have heard the Corning whistle, so that means I'm running late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, as you know, is brought to you by our friends at Boss Security, located in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. A beautiful view of Market Street this morning. And we're broadcasting live from said Market Street in the Hesselson studio. A comment from a viewer. The only problem with the federal lawsuit against New York State is that the oppressed taxpayers will have to foot the bill for these obstructionists to fight a legitimate lawsuit. Yeah, think of the cost, even when you look at the lawsuits against Trump that Letitia James brought. Think of how much that cost us. Well, let's take it a step further. Remember, Governor Cuomo, what was that, up to $28 million it cost us as taxpayers? We were still on the hook even after all this time for that lawsuit filed against him about harassment. And he even tried to get a gag order so that the young woman's lawyers couldn't keep bringing up the fact that it was costing taxpayers $28 million. Yeah, it's all one big cost. They're showing the whole world the level of New York State political corruption. Thank you very much for that comment. Keep the comments coming in if you're new to the program. You see the number on the bottom of the screen. Feel free to weigh in at any time. Also, I would add, you can throw in a wave if you'd like, but you can, and I like that some people are doing this now, you can throw your name on the text, and I'll make sure to mention, and you can say where you're from as well, and I'll try to mention that as well if you want to do that, and if not, it's fine, I'm going to read them anyway. I'm not going to read your name, I'm just saying it's fine, I'll read your comment. Trump should demand that Bragg is axed in any deal with Hochul, because we know that there's some dealings going on now with congestion pricing, Stefanik's seat, now with Bondi's lawsuit, though yesterday they were supposed to meet for lunch. That was canceled. But the New York Post editorial board's thought is that if Governor Hochul really wants to swing a dirty deal with President Trump to save her congestion tolls, she probably needs to offer more than just not delaying the election in Stefanik's old seat. May we suggest she throw in Alvin Bragg? That is, the governor should at long last remove the Manhattan district attorney from his duty for cause, namely to protect public safety. Restoring safety is core to saving New York City, something dear to the president's heart. But Bragg has shown consistently he is on the side of the criminal, not the victim. Witness his stubborn insistence on under-prosecuting just about everyone not named Daniel Penny or Donald Trump. He's even soft on anti-Semites. Yes, Hochul should have canned Bragg years ago, but we expect a governor who claims that Republicans are somehow to blame for the uncertainty over setting a special election for at least Stefanik's seat will manage to find an explanation for doing it now, actually suggesting that it was Republicans' fault for that delay. And everybody knew it was for political reasons. Even Democrats started to turn on her because it looks so bad. You know, the party that had been saying that they're fighting for democracy for so long, showing that they don't care about it when it comes to pure politics and trying to hurt Trump's agenda. But continuing. It's a pot sweetener for the president for obvious reasons. Another of Bragg's abuses of office was his Ahab-like pursuit of Trump in the hush money case, where the DA invented new tough legal doctrines left and right in his effort to land the Great Orange defendant. That abuse, for what it's worth, is another fully substantive reason to oust Bragg. Between them, he and State Attorney General Tish James have every legitimate New York business worried that they could face legal persecution simply for offending the progressive powers that be. Yeah, the business climate here is disastrous, and it has been for quite some time. And they just pile on worse and worse to make it more concerning. But that's yet another drag on the local economy that New York absolutely doesn't need. Getting rid of it might at least partly defray the woeful economic impact of Hochul's $9 on its way to $15 toll to enter Manhattan's business district. The governor should axe Bragg right now in advance of any deal with Trump. A show of good faith is always a great way to start a negotiation. Interesting thought from the New York Post as we update you on New York State issues. We have other New York State issues to get to. We are going to be talking about the cuts at the federal level when it comes to waste, fraud, and corruption, when it comes to either DOGE or just the Trump administration in general. Again, this morning when we had our breaking news that Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed, which is exciting news. We also, we had a lot of breaking news. There's so much breaking news during the Trump administration that it's hard. Here we are just about an hour in, and I've already forgot probably half the breaking news we started with. That may say something more about me. But the federal judge allowing Trump to push forward with the buyouts for the government workers after 75,000 accepted the offer. So that's some of the breaking news this morning. And as we've been talking about, the DOJ lawsuit against Governor Hochul, against Letitia James, and New York State. More on New York State when we come back and wrap up hour number one. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. You're watching Frankly Speaking. We're wrapping up hour number one, which is really hard to believe because we have so much left to cover. Thank you to everybody sending in comments, sending in waves, good discussions thus far. I've got bad news for you, though. If you were banking on this year being saved by those rebate checks that Governor Hochul was going to send, they've hit a roadblock, folks. I'm sorry about that. I know many of you were saying, boy, that $300 check is really going to make up for the inflation that we've suffered under the Biden administration. That $300, what am I going to do with it all? I can't wait to spend it and to invest. Well, Governor Hochul's plan to send checks to middle-income New Yorkers is getting pushback from her own party, as state lawmakers say there are better ways to spend the dough. Hochul wants to send $300 checks to single New Yorkers making under $150,000 a year and families making under $300,000. But some Democrats are scoffing at the eye-watering $3 billion price tag, particularly a year before the governor is up for re-election. Senator James Skoufis, Democrat from Orange County, said the checks address a symptom, or I guess it would be Orange County. The checks address a symptom of the problems rather than the problem itself. We need to address the fundamental issues that drive the high cost of living in New York. These checks fail to do that. Yes, $300, not really making up the difference in any cost. Do you think about how expensive it is to live in New York or in New York City even? Listen, I've said it a million times. I'll take the $300. I'll take it. I'd rather give it to me than have them waste it at the state level. But having said that, what does that do for a family? Let's say the $500 for a family. Is that week, 2 weeks worth of groceries? I mean, again, I'll take it, but we know what it is. It's a vote buying check. Assembly Democrats discussed the plan during a closed-door conference. It's always a closed-door conference this week, and it was first reported by Politico, with many expressing reservations. I'd prefer to do other things to help working-class New Yorkers, Assemblyman Harvey Epstein said. Well, what are those things? Well, he suggested the money could be used for pre-K and after-school programs, while Skoufis floated doubling the school tax relief credit, or STAR, so really just still giving money. But okay. An unusual amount of Democrats were reluctant to speak on the proposal at length. Everybody likes a check, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes told the Post. One senator simply sent the New York Post a shrug emoji when asked if they thought the checks are a good way to spend $3 billion. But there are some getting behind the plans. I think people generally don't mind getting money in the mail, and I don't think my constituents are going to object to it, said Assemblyman David Weprin. So it has hit a little bit of a roadblock. Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie have floated other one-time uses like paying off more than $6 billion that New York owes to the federal government for pandemic-era unemployment insurance. So again, if you were depending on that $300, you may want to wait. Don't start spending it yet. We got to take a break. Wrap up hour number one. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking, hour number two, mere moments away. Hour number two of Frankly Speaking. Sorry, putting together all of the great comments coming in. Welcome back As we kick off hour number 2 with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, the breaking news and the big stories on the broadcast thus far. Senate confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. The DOJ announced their lawsuit against New York, Hochul, and State Attorney General Letitia James over sanctuary status. And the federal judge allows Trump to push forward with buyouts for government workers after 75,000 had accepted the offer. Okay. Comments from viewers. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. It's too bad the Hochul won't meet with Trump. He could make her so great that she could get reelected. Even Putin will meet with Trump. Yeah, I think they've been talking, especially about this congestion toll. There was supposed to be a lunch today, but after Pam Bondi announced that they were going after with this lawsuit against Hochul specifically and New York and Letitia James as well, I guess she figured that she's probably not in the best negotiating point to sit down with Trump. Obviously, Trump is known for being a great negotiator. Hochul not. So already kind of on her heels going into lunch. It was probably actually a smart move made by someone in her team to say, let's not go to that lunch. Let's regroup, see what we have to do. Because she wants that congestion toll. Right now it's at $9, going to move up to $15. She kind of tried to threaten Trump in a way to say that she wasn't going to call the special election for Elise Stefanik's seat until November. So a year that the 21st Congressional District, essentially a year, the 21st Congressional District would be without representation in Washington. When that backfired spectacularly, not just in the media, but by Democrats, and some speculate that Trump gave her a call. Talked her out of that one. Now she's a little bit on the ropes, so to speak. So I guess I can't blame her for not meeting at the White House to have lunch with the president. All right, comment from a different viewer. Oh, this is from Mark. Hey, Mark. Oh, well, $300 is a drop in the bucket. How about lowering the tax from 8% to 5%? That will help the wallet better. Or look at some of the taxes when it comes to gasoline and the like. Yeah, again, I'll say it over and over again. I would gladly accept the $300. But all that is a vote buying scheme. Because what at the end of the day is again, I'm not laughing at $300. We'd all like to have an extra $300. But what is $300 really going to do for you when it comes to inflation? Buy you groceries maybe 2 weeks? The way costs are. All right. You know, this was really interesting to me. Since we're talking about New York, and we're going to get into DOGE and Trump, and I said I was going to get your blood boiling at 6 in the morning, but I waited till 7. I'm going to tell you a couple of the media talking points, for lack of a better word, and what they're saying about Trump, and I think mislabeling Trump and Musk and the like. But I saw this on Empire Report this morning, and it piqued my interest. And if you're not familiar with Empire Report, it's kind of like Drudge Report, but focused more on New York State issues. Well, they had New York school districts ranked from 1 to 670 based on last year's graduation rates. So this kind of interests me because I thought, well, I wonder how we're doing in our area because, on this program we talked extensively about the recent budget increases, the recent budget votes, or the last year, when I say recent, last year, and just how expensive the budgets are getting in our local districts. And there was some protests, there was some outrage, some even got turned down around the first vote, and then it went to another vote. I don't think any went to contingency. So they put together, and this is at NewYorkUpstate.com, so you can find it for yourself. They have the table. It comes from the education department. They didn't have every school in here because it's stated that the education department didn't report the numbers. For schools with small numbers of graduates, the department doesn't do it at all. So I looked up Steuben and Chemung, and if you want me to look up anybody else, I'd be happy to, because I'm just thinking about the cost. And where, as many of us were saying, why does the budget keep increasing so much? Well, for instance, in rankings, Horseheads, which I know there was some concern about their budget, ranked 281, which sounds bad, but it is a 91% graduation rate, where we learn the average rate of graduation in all of New York State is 86%. So the higher than average. Just if you're curious, Elmira Heights, 88%. They're ranked at 406. And Elmira School District, 72% graduation rate. Wow. That ranks them at 637. So then I looked at Steuben County, just out of curiosity. And in Steuben, the highest rank for graduation was Prattsburgh, ranking at 52. They had 97% graduation rate. But I wanted, just out of curiosity, because Corning was another budget that had some interest around it because of how much costs have increased, how much the budget was increasing at the time. Corning ranks in at 531st in the state with a graduation rate of only 83%, so below the national or below the statewide average of 86. Just something to keep in mind. I don't know if throwing money at it is always the right answer. But people, as we hear so many people complain about costs in New York and the taxes in New York, they seem to vote in these budgets anyway, vote themselves more expense. Just interesting to me. Hey, let's take a look at what the media has to say. Donald Trump's pledge to lower costs, quote, on day one is unraveling. Have you heard that? I've heard this on just about every news that I've watched the last few days. This is the talking point. Yes, the media, again, is taking everything Trump says literally, where Republicans have always taken Trump kind of figuratively, knowing that some of it's bluster, some of it's just the way he talks. But now they're trying to point, here we are, not even 1 month into his presidency, and the media now has the audacity to talk about costs. Remember, there was no inflation. There was no cost during the campaign. That they would laugh at you if you said you couldn't afford your groceries and say, no, according to the statistics, the economy's doing great. You just don't get it. And they would mock you and ridicule you. Now, all of a sudden, that Trump's in office, inflation hits them. Now they realize that, wow, the economy's really tough right now. It's hard to pay your groceries. And Trump said he was going to fix it day one. The media in this it's so predictable, but doesn't make it any less frustrating. But it's nice to know that now they care about people not being able to afford their groceries, because during the campaign they would laugh at you if you said you couldn't. Remember that one interview Don Lemon gave where he mocked the person saying they couldn't afford their groceries and pulled out a report from some government bureaucracy that hopefully has been axed by now by DOGE, saying, look at page 274 and you'll see that the economy is actually really good, sir, so I don't get it. And then like criticized him because he had a boat or something, because he wanted to have some type of recreation in his life. So that's the new talking point. Just buckle up and prepare for it if you haven't heard it already. And this is one that I don't think, I know I didn't see coming, but typical with the media, because they've really wanted to push two things. The media and the Democrats want to push one of two things, that it's really President Musk. And we heard that in Senate, in a congressional hearing yesterday, in a really despicable way. And we've also, or they're also trying to push the idea that he's so powerful, that Musk is so powerful that Trump, maybe that'll get under his skin and get rid of him. Remember the picture from yesterday and the video from the press conference, well, from technically 2 days ago, but we talked about it yesterday, whereas Elon Musk answering questions from the press about DOGE and relaying some of the concerns that they had. And it was him and his son and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was sitting at the Resolute desk while Musk was standing talking to the press. Well, according to those in the media, and this coming from the far left, Daily Beast, but keep in mind, they're not the only ones, Trump humiliated in the most powerless image ever of a U.S. president. Elon Musk humiliated President Donald Trump during Tuesday's joint press conference in the Oval Office, which left Trump looking like the most powerless U.S. president ever caught on camera, according to MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell. Now, we know about the press conference. We don't need to go. Well, one number that they take away is that Musk spoke 3,666 words to Trump's 2,487. Wasn't the press conference focused on DOGE? Musk had his 4-year-old son there at the press conference. He stood over Trump while the president sat behind the Resolute desk, delivering a picture of presidential subservience, the likes of which have never been seen. The most powerless image of a president of the United States ever created by a camera, Lawrence O'Donnell said. I think there's some video and some photos that we could point to, or even a debate that we could point to during the Biden administration that looked very powerless. This did not look powerless. This just looked like a press conference. Do you see the grasping at straws? Do you see the anger and the hate? Now, I know it's Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC, but it's still worth noting how the media is responding to DOGE taking away all this government waste. Man, there's a lot of people that must make a lot off of the waste because there's some anger. Former Vice President Mike Pence never had a day like that in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. Vice President J.D. Vance will never have a day like that in the Oval Office with Donald Trump because Donald Trump is the boss of J.D. Vance. Trump, he continued, has always craved the attention of the truly rich, virtually all of whom ignored Donald Trump as phony rich and vulgar rich. Now he has the attention of the world's richest man who can literally bail him out of the $82.5 million he currently owes writer E. Jean Carroll. We have no idea how dependent Donald Trump is on Elon Musk. There will probably never be a way of knowing. They're so blatantly transparent in what they're trying to do there. The most powerless image of a president, because they held a press conference. It goes to show you their hatred for both Elon Musk and for Donald Trump, and they're not knowing how to handle the success that has happened so far. Keep in mind, today is February 13th, folks. February 13th. Donald Trump was sworn in January 20th, not even a month. And look at how much has been accomplished. And that's why the media resorts to that kind of pathetic name calling, hoping to get under Trump's skin, and clearly not going to work. When we come back, we're going to tell you about some of those successes, some of the things that are being proposed, some DOGE and some not. We're also going to be talking about the Trump administration in general. Keep those comments, keep those waves coming in this morning, as we have brought to you numerous times. The Senate confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence yesterday. The DOJ announced the lawsuit against New York, Hochul, and State Attorney General Letitia James over our sanctuary status. Big news breaking overnight. And finally, the federal judge has allowed Trump to push forward with the buyouts for government workers who accepted the deal, the severance deal. 75,000 people accepted that deal. That's where we stand this morning. Keep the comments coming in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We have so many comments coming in. I'm trying to catch up on them. Thank you so much. You can continue to reach out there. I will try to do my best to get to as many of them as I possibly can. Let's go through a few of them now, shall we? Did I mention we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio? I get distracted sometimes. Here we go. Your question is for education. How much have they lowered the standards in order that some more kids can graduate since, let's say, 1980? That's a very great point. When we see, the exorbitant budgets, and then you see these rates of graduation, and some are okay, but some are quite sad, especially after the conversations with the budget. Now, I think their argument would be, well, that's why we need more money, but that is not the case, folks. Maybe focus more on education, and I think this is a larger conversation that Trump is having about the Department of Education. But it's not about spending money, because obviously the budgets continue to increase every year and the numbers keep going down. Even to this viewer's point, they've lowered the standards, even talking now about getting rid of regents. So yeah, disturbing numbers in my opinion. It shocked me this morning going to Empire Report to look at, for instance, Corning ranking in at 531 in the state with only an 83% graduation rate, even though the budget that we saw, the same goes for Horse is much better, but 91%. with ranking at 281. Just interesting to me, and it wasn't really on topic necessarily or for any reason, except for I remember the discussions we had on the air about how the budgets just keep increasing, and people complain about living in New York State and how expensive it is, and yet when they have an option to not vote themselves a tax, they vote themselves a tax. It can be frustrating. Another comment, the sad part is people who only follow mainstream media believe this stuff. Yes, that's in reference to Trump humiliated in the most powerless image ever when he was standing there with Musk. Or Donald Trump's pledge to lower costs on day one is unraveling. Comment from a different viewer. Frank, I see that the media hasn't learned a thing. That's for sure. The only reason why I even watch nightly news is because it's too dark and cold to do anything else. For the last 3 nights in a row, they say Trump, without proof, said such and such. It's pretty sad. I never heard them say that Biden said anything without proof. Oh, yeah, and they did the same thing to Musk. Without proof, he cites this. And Trump, like he was going to, I think who even said it? What? Don't quote me. Was it Scott Jennings? I don't remember. But they said, what, you expect Musk to bring in 10,000 documents to give to reporters? And again, you raised such a great point. When did they ever say Biden said anything without proof? When did they ever fact check Biden? You want to go back to the most powerless image ever? Look at some of those images of former President Biden when he was president. So the media is so predictable. Nonetheless frustrating. Comment from a different viewer. Ironically, the media is now blaming Trump for the egg prices. I know. Leave it to them to blame him for bird flu, something out of his control. Not a surprise at all. It's the same with, essentially blaming him for this inflation. Remember, they told us there was no inflation, that you're just not smart enough to get it, that the economy is actually really good. That's what they told us during the campaign. But magically, now they're worried about inflation because Trump's been in office less than a month. And the same to your point, something out of anybody's control and began before Trump took office is now going to be Trump's fault, and they will beat that to death. You're exactly right. And if you want to really talk about it, well, I don't know if we'll have a chance to get to it, but there are 2 great pieces of the New York Post talking about this media narrative now that is constitutional crisis. Well, yes. Yeah, let's get to it. Make up your mind, Frank. No, I'm not going to, because I want to bring this up before we go to break. Lee Zeldin, former gubernatorial candidate here in New York State, was in the area not that long ago, back in November, for that Tri-County Republican dinner. Now EPA administrator. Lee Zeldin announced yesterday that he's found $20 billion in taxpayer money that the Biden administration parked at a financial institution in an apparent effort to prevent the Trump administration from cutting grants to far-left activist groups. $20 billion. And again, you've got to point to these things as saying it's only been, it's not even a month. And Zeldin was just sworn in not that long ago. Zeldin explained in a video that he posted on X that the Biden administration's obfuscation was unprecedented, and he demanded the unnamed financial institution to immediately return the funds to the EPA. Quote, shockingly, roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. The scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposely designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. Basically, hey, Trump's going to come in, he's going to change some things at the EPA, so you guys throw as much money as possible. Don't even look at the documents. This is very much like what we learned about FEMA on yesterday's broadcast, and this is an attempt to thwart Trump or to continue the Obama works too, but the Biden policies in the EPA by throwing the $20 billion. The $20 billion appears to be the money that was appropriated to the EPA under the Inflation Reduction Act, which boosted government spending on environmental projects. The EPA administrator and a former New York Republican congressman said the massive pot of money was, quote, awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out the funds to non-governmental organizations at their discretion. So here's 8 entities. You dole out wherever you want. Whatever kind of paperwork, it doesn't matter to us. One of the 8 entities Climate United Fund received just under $7 billion from the Biden EPA to dole out. Climate United Fund describes itself as a national coalition of experienced nonprofit financial institutions investing in solutions that tackle our nation's toughest economic and environmental challenges. The group says it provides affordable, accessible financing for clean energy projects in communities that are often overlooked by traditional investing. Zeldin expressed concern with how Climate United and the 7 other entities will decide to allocate the funds and over whether any former Biden administration EPA staffers will benefit from the, quote, rush job. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people making a lot of money. When you're talking that much, $7 billion up to $20 billion, depending, what entity you were part of, there's a lot of administrators that just got a gigantic pay raise. In their defense, if I were them, I would say, well, we've got a lot more work to do. We've got to get these funds out. So this is much more than we signed up for, so we need a substantial raise. And guess who gets to decide that raise? They do, because they're in charge of the rush job, as Lee Zeldin put it. Let me make one thing abundantly clear. At this point, there is zero reason to suspect any wrongdoing by the bank, Zeldin said. The financial agent agreement with the bank, The financial agent agreement with the bank needs to be instantly terminated, and the bank must immediately return all of the gold bars that the Biden administration tossed off the Titanic. Referring to shocking post-election video which showed Biden administration EPA officials telling an undercover Project Veritas reporter that the agency was tossing gold bricks off the Titanic before Trump assumed office. Yeah, it really was spending that money specifically with the Inflation Reduction Act for kind of their pet projects. The EPA needs to reassume responsibility for all these funds, Zeldin continued. The EPA administrator noted that he plans to refer the matter to the agency's Office of the Inspector General and will work with the Justice Department as well. The days of irresponsibly shoveling boatloads of cash to far-left activist groups in the name of environmental justice and climate equity are over. The American public deserves a more transparent and accountable government that was transpired these past 4 years. Good for Lee Zeldin. We're glad that he hit the ground running. We knew he would. It was a great pick for the EPA by President Trump. But it's good to see that we have a very different EPA. It's no longer Biden's EPA. It's Trump's, and Lee Zeldin in charge of it, wanting back that $20 billion of your tax-paying dollars that were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA, just trying to rush the money out to their pet projects. All right, we're going to talk about the constitutional crisis that all this leads to. Yes, the constitutional crisis. I saw someone put it, I'm going to paraphrase, but the Elon Musk is an unelected person who has the audacity to destroy the country by getting rid of unelected bureaucrats. That the argument is he was unelected and therefore should have no power. The people that should have the power are the people that were unelected into the bureaucracy. Interesting argument to make, but we're going to talk a little bit about that and the quote-unquote constitutional crisis. When we come back, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be maybe right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. I'm so glad you joined us. I'm reading all these comments. I love all the comments. All right, let's go get right to them. Okay, with all this wasteful money that they're finding, $90 billion, and they're $100 billion. Then we shouldn't have to pay taxes for a year. LOL. Yes, that's one way of looking at it. I have not heard that proposed, but I think it's a good idea. We'll pass it along. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. How can graduation rates be in the 85 percentile range when the national 8th grade proficiency rates for reading and math are 33% and 28% respectively? So actually almost 7 out of 10 can't read at an 8th grade level, and roughly 8 out of 10 students can't do 8th grade math. Essentially, we must be graduating students who don't quit. That could very well be the case, especially now that they're talking about getting rid of regents. That's a great point. I thought the numbers were startling, and that's why I wanted to pass them on to you. I don't believe you could get them anywhere else because it's not something they're going to be broadcasting from the rooftops as they ask for more and more money with the budgets. That's on top of when they have to start putting, which isn't their fault, but the EV bus mandates. But the budgets just grow so substantially every year. But they seem to be able to get the money, so why not? We keep voting ourselves in another tax. Here's a nice comment. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for all the hello, how do you pronounce that, GIFs? I appreciate that. That's nice of you to say this morning. The left is faking another Trump crisis. This is Theo Wold, and he says on Saturday, U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer, an Obama appointee, barred, quote, political appointees from accessing internal Treasury Department systems, an utterly baseless and frankly ludicrous order. In effect, Engelmeyer prohibited Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and his politically accountable employees, along with Elon Musk and President Trump's departments of government efficiency, from doing their jobs in favor of rule by unelected bureaucrats. Again, like I was saying, how dare this unelected person go against the power of unelected bureaucrats? The Constitution nowhere empowers the judiciary to issue such a ruling. So in response, Vice President J.D. Vance correctly posted, quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. That's when the left lost their mind. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker described Vance's post as a warning that the Trump administration intends to break the law. Now, keep in mind, J.B. Pritzker, he's a billionaire. He wants to be president. Well, time will tell. He doesn't seem to have the charisma. Chris Murphy claimed it was the meat of a constitutional crisis. Yes, that is the phrase, constitutional crisis. Not to be undone, former GOP Congresswoman Liz Cheney accused the vice president of rage quitting the republic. She tries to be too cute by half. She tries to be hip. And, well, I mean, if I were a Democrat and really wanted Harris to win, I would put a lot of that blame on Cheney and Harris' decision-making for latching on to Cheney. But continuing, Vance's statement is correct and should not be controversial. Engelmeyer's order is ridiculous on its face, and the vice president is right about the limits of judicial power. The Supreme Court has long recognized that certain government actions are beyond the power of the judiciary to review and control, and its precedents backed Vance's position. As the court recently put in Trump v. United States, when the president acts pursuant to his exclusive constitutional powers, Congress cannot, as a structural matter, regulate such actions, and courts cannot review them. Vance in his tweet gave a hypothetical example of how the judiciary might violate legitimate executive power. Quote, if a judge tried to command the attorney general in how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's illegal. Not long ago, the Biden administration agreed with him about this exact matter. So, what explains the Democrat Party's complete hysteria over a social media post? Liz Cheney, Chris Murphy, and J.B. Pritzker are not unfamiliar with prosecutorial discretion, the separations of power, or the existence of constraint of judicial power. But they do have a vested interest in manufacturing a supposed constitutional crisis in the early days of Trump's terms. This is like Russia at the beginning of his first term. Their plan to delegitimize the White House's policy initiatives and derail the momentum of his early presidency to wipe away the mandate Trump secured with his total victory in November. And that's one thing, and I saw James Carville talked about it, saying the cavalry's not coming, that this stuff is being done, is going to continue to be done. And Trump has hit the ground running, and they don't know how to stop the momentum. So they throw around the term constitutional crisis in an attempt to slow him down, to delegitimize what he's been doing. Once the constitutional crisis talking point went out, leftist outlets amplified it. And we're going to talk about that when we come back. But don't be fooled. President Trump and his political appointees, like Treasury Secretary Bessent, are using the power the American voters entrusted them. Engelmeyer's order has no constitutional basis, no matter what crisis the left attempts to create. When we come back, we're going to hear from Jonathan Turley on this exact matter. We know we like Jonathan Turley. Thanks for all the comments coming in. We'll get to those when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you for joining us. Let's go to viewer comments. How many thousands are in a million, Joe? I'm not sure if you're Joe or if it's a typo, but if you are Joe, hi, Joe. 1,000 thousands in a million. 1,000 thousands in a million. Okay. Comment from a different viewer. Would you give the graduation rate website again? Sure. It's linked this morning on Empire Report, but the actual website, and it's an article, and in the website you can go to the rankings and you can type in by county, you can type in by school name. It is NewYorkUpstate.com, and that's all spelled out, not NY. So it's NewYorkUpstate.com, and you can type in, there's the school districts ranked from 1 to 670. Not all schools are in there because the Department of Education didn't report some numbers. We looked at, when we talked about it earlier, some of the numbers are staggering. The best in Steuben was Plattsburgh at 97% graduation rate. Corning was actually at the bottom of the list in Steuben County at 83% graduation rate, putting them at a ranking of 531. And then you have in Chemung, there's only 3 in Chemung that were listed. Horseheads at a 91%, and that ranks them at 281. Elmira Heights at 88%, ranking them at 406. And Elmira, 72% graduation rate, ranking at 637. Just to give you an idea, the average statewide graduation rate last year was 86%. There you go. So again, one last time, NewYorkUpstate.com. I hope that helps. Okay, next comment. I have made mention before about the supposed education system. When will the lawsuits start again like they did back in the late 80s and 90s? Because kids who graduated didn't have the ability to read or write. There were multiple lawsuits the Department of Education lost. This needs to become a thing again. Thank you very much. And we're going to talk about, we'll talk about that next, as a matter of fact. Comment from a different viewer. As the Democrats always say, never let a good crisis go to waste. Balanced budget amendment now. Thank you. So Trump has called for the Department of Education to be closed immediately, describing it as a big con job. When asked by a reporter how soon Trump wanted the Department of Education to be closed, Trump criticized how the U.S., the education system was ranked 40th compared to other countries, but ranked number 1 in terms of cost per student. Oh, I'd like it to be closed immediately, he said. Yeah, what did he say about McMahon, who's in charge of it? Her job is to basically lose her job, to work her way out of the job. But he said, look, the Department of Education is a big con job. We're ranked, so they rank the top 40 countries in the world. We're ranked number 40th, but we're ranked number 1 in one department, cost per pupil. I always have trouble with that word, per student. So we spend more per student than any other country in the world, but we're ranked number 40. We've been between 38 and 40. The last time I looked, it was 38, and then I looked 2 days ago, it came out at number 40. Norway, Denmark, Sweden, I hate to say it, China, as big as it is, it ranked in the top 5. That's a primary competitor. We're ranked number 40. So if we're ranked number 40, that means something is really wrong, right? He said, he continued to state that the United States government should send education back down to states. I say send it back to Iowa, to Idaho, to Colorado. We probably have 35, maybe 37 states that will do as well as Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden. That'll be just as good. Yes, that's how he worded it about Linda McMahon. He wants her to put herself out of a job. So there you go, kind of an update with what we're talking about. I want to go back to this constitutional crisis issue because Jonathan Turley, very well trusted, someone that we like to mention on the program when we see. This is an op-ed. You can read the full thing at the New York Post. But he talks about the Democrat Party jumping the shark, and that's in reference, and he gives the whole reasoning for the term jump the shark. But basically, Happy Days was a very popular show. They had an episode where Fonzie literally jumped the shark in skis in his leather jacket, and that term, and that's when the show kind of realized that it had peaked and was no longer going to be a hit almost, and so they now use the term jump the shark. That's what that's in reference to. For years, Democrats and their allies pushed the absurd claim that democracy was about to die if Biden or Harris was not elected. The public wasn't buying it, and of course, in 2024, we saw the landslide victory for Trump. Rather than examine its messaging, Democrats decided to double down. After the election, politicians and pundits announced a new constitutional crisis, and that is the downsizing of the federal government led by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. Chris Mays, the Attorney General of Arizona, declared this week, we are on the brink of a dictatorship, and America has never been in a more dangerous position than she is today. The same media that carries the breathless accounts of the imminent death of democracy with the last election are now running constitutional crisis articles with many of those same experts who said It was the death of democracy. Now it's a constitutional crisis. Despite Trump repeating that he will abide by the courts while appealing opposing decisions, NPR insisted that Trump's circle has indicated it is willing to ignore court orders and defy judicial authority. During his first term, Trump repeatedly lost cases, as did his predecessor, Obama, and successor, Biden, but he continued to comply with those rulings. The fact is that we have the oldest and most stable constitutional system in history. It has repeatedly survived challenges from political to economic meltdowns that would have destroyed other systems. We don't have time to get to all of this. But for many citizens, what is most striking is not Trump's actions, but how Democrats are seeking to prevent the very reforms that a majority of voters supported. Ilhan Omar warned that this is a really, really sad day in America. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of a dictatorship looks like when you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power. That is how dictators are made. Actually, this is not how dictators are made, but how democracies work. Trump ran on reducing the deficit and size of the government. The public is worried about a crisis that was not one of democracy, but of debt. We are becoming a debtor nation where every citizen now shoulders a $106,000 per capita burden to pay for out-of-control spending. Nevertheless, in the first DOGE subcommittee hearing in the House, Representative Stephen Lynch insisted that he would defend democracy, which is under attack by DOGE and the effort to carry out of Trump's campaign pledges. What is truly a danger is the status quo. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer may have ironically had the most honest moment when he joined one of the daily protests and yelled how Musk's government efficiency efforts are taking away everything we have. Very telling choice of wording. By declaring a constitutional crisis, these figures are using rage rhetoric that gives a license for extreme conduct and messaging. And that's what's scary. This dividing, this extreme violent rhetoric that they've been using time and time again. Ron Wyden declaring it a coup. Maxine Waters called on citizens to fight back. Cory Booker called for fights in the streets and for citizens to rise up. Jasmine Crockett yelled, "We are going to be in your face. We're going to be on your, we'll say, behinds, and we're going to make sure you understand what democracy looks like," and this ain't. Judging from the polls, the public sees it. The Fonz saw it, even if he still does not get it. Just before the election, Henry Winkler mocked Trump's huge Madison Square Garden rally and told NBC that that's his life's bread, his life's blood is the sound of appreciation or adulation or whatever. That whatever is called public support. It is a lesson that the Democrats may want to learn if they ever want to see happier days. Judging from the polls, the public sees that. They didn't believe Democrats before, and they don't believe them now. Will they ever believe them again? So according to Turley, Democrats exhausted their last of their credibility with this false claim of a constitutional crisis. All right, you heard the Corning whistle, perhaps? Let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, of course, brought to you by our friends. You see them right in the right-hand corner. Boss Security. Thank you to Boss Security for the roof cam. It's getting a little rainy out there. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Let's get to some of the viewer comments, shall we? First up, Frank. Oh, this is from Ken. Hey, Ken. The lying, slander, demonization, hypocrisy, and calls for violence in the streets coming from the left staggers the imagination. If this reaction was coming from the right during Biden's presidency, Merrick Garland's Gestapo would be rounding up those domestic terrorists and throwing them in the clink. If violence starts, I hope Pam Bondi holds the perpetrators to the letter of the law. Very good point, Ken. The hypocrisy knows no bounds. All right, Mark writes in, it doesn't surprise me New York schools are failing. Maybe they should focus on learning more than sports. Yeah, and kind of the extracurriculars in general, at least when it comes to budgets and the cost of the education. I know that it plays a big role. Comment from a viewer, I wonder if any of those idiots have ever read the Constitution. The people, I assume you're saying that are calling everything a constitutional crisis. I have a copy if they'd like me to send it to them. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Trump fires USAID's top watchdog after reports of billions being wasted on education for al-Qaeda terrorists and for the drag shows that we know became a major part of the campaign. President Trump has fired the top watchdog for the U.S. Agency for International Development, just as details resurfaced that the controversial agency had bankrolled the college education of an al-Qaeda terrorists with ties to 9/11 hijackers. Paul Martin, who has served as the Inspector General since 2023, was informed via email that his termination was effective immediately. Martin wasn't given a reason for his firing. The White House wouldn't comment on the termination. His dismissal came just one day after his office had published a report criticizing Trump's call to freeze USAID funds after finding that the agency had wasted billions on left-wing schemes in recent years. In the report, the watchdog's office had said that the Trump administration's push to dismantle USAID had crippled the agency's ability to conduct oversight of unspent aid worth roughly $8.2 billion. Staff cuts and stop work orders had made it difficult to ensure taxpayer-funded aid would end up in the hands of those intended, according to the report. Meanwhile, news of Martin's departure came as unearthed records show USAID had shelled out thousands to send American-born jihadist Anwar al-Awlaki to Colorado State University back in 1990, an education that he used to help recruit and groom terrorists for future attacks on the U.S. soil. And we could go through all that. You've seen the lists. But just kind of as an update from a story we continue to bring you about USAID, Trump did fire the USAID's top watchdog, as we've heard of all that waste and misspent money. As I did mention, and as an update, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said on Wednesday that she clawed back the full payment made by FEMA for hotels to house migrants in New York City, days after DOGE announced the discovery of a $59 million payment made last week. And they said, well, they side... Now, what was the exact term that they used? Well, anyway, they went around leadership to spend this $59 million. You got to say, how can 4 employees do that? Well, they were supposedly fired, but that's some of the. You've got to keep in mind as these bureaucracies start to see what DOGE is doing. They're what Lee Zeldin mentioned, throwing gold bars over the Titanic. They're spending some more of that Inflation Reduction Act money on left-wing causes. But Noem said, I have clawed back the full payment the FEMA deep state activists unilaterally gave to New York City migrant hotels. And that's a great point. Deep state activists. That's really the definition of deep state activists. I got my buddy there across the street. We're adding that to the wave. Yep. Okay. Yes. So, going back to the exact quote. Noem announced on Wednesday, noting that the FEMA was actively funding the Roosevelt Hotel that serves as a TDA base of operations, that's that gang, and was used to house Laken Riley's killer. Mark my words, there will not be a single penny spent that goes against the interest and safety of the American people. So clawed back that $59 million. That's great to hear. And that is a great way that she puts it. The deep state activists, that was 4 of them that realized, DOGE is coming for us. Let's spend that money quickly. And think of how many people were making a fortune off of this money just being thrown out willy-nilly. $59 million to hotels in New York City. But we got to take a short break. Get those last-minute comments in because we're wrapping up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to all the comments this morning. We had a ton. Everybody's walking by. It's raining out. Waving at everybody this morning. Keep those comments coming in. We'll read the last second ones and wrap up today's edition. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again to Boss Security. We're bringing the Frankly Speaking roof cam with a beautiful view of historic Market Street. And on that street, we're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. Thank you. How about forming an NGO that offers illegals free flights and perhaps a one-time payment back to their nice, warm home countries? Self-deportation would be cheaper in the near and long term for us. Thanks, Fred. That's a good point. They said that the government workers that have been interviewed by DOGE, that the interviews are anxiety-provoking, which I think there should be a little bit to that when you're talking about cutting nameless, faceless bureaucrats who have been made so much money. This one person, all speaking anonymously, so the interviews are anxiety-provoking. The tension swells the moment a worker receives a calendar invite from a Gmail account, they said frequently with almost no notice and often scheduled over existing client meetings. Another employee called it a whirlwind. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor was pushing the kind of constitutional crisis narrative, saying that Trump is turning into a monarchy. This was at Florida's Miami-Dade College, saying we will lose our democracy if people are unable to determine the credibility of the news and information they are consuming. You cannot depend upon what people are telling you, urging people to research original sources and not rely on any one news source. News literacy is the obligation of all of us to become more knowledgeable, to get accurate information. Well, I appreciate Sonia Sotomayor essentially promoting Frankly Speaking, because you get all the information you need right here on Frankly Speaking. She did not mention us by name, but we can read between the lines, so thank you to Judge Sonia Sotomayor. The Trump administration demands the NCAA returns awards given to transgender competitors in female athletic events after that executive order. We're going to go breeze through some of these stories quickly because we're out of time. Tim Walz's daughter spoke out against that, believed that executive order set a dangerous precedent. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's daughter, Hope Walz, went viral this week for a series of TikToks criticizing President Donald Trump's executive order banning transgender athletes from women and girls sports, saying it is dangerous for the trans community, women, minorities, anyone who is not a straight white man. We're talking about human beings, and the President of the United States is targeting them because he thinks it will gain him political points or whatever. Now, if you don't remember who Tim Walz is, that was Kamala Harris's running mate. Finally, where was it? Oh, I had one more New York State issue. Trump is being asked to shut down New York City's injection sites where drug addicts consume with impunity. These sites not only enable but also perpetrate illegal drug use. Nicole Malotakis, the U.S. representative, said on February 11th in a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi. The Staten Island congresswoman cited a Third Circuit appeals ruling in Philly that concluded it was a federal crime to open a supervised injection site for consumption room or illegal drug use. That does it for us today. Thank you for all the comments. We had a great time at least I did, had a blast on the program this morning. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you join us every weekday morning starting at 6. If you're new to the program, you see that number on the bottom of the screen. Feel free to reach out. That's 24/7. I always appreciate getting comments to kick off the show in the morning. So you can weigh in on all the topics we discussed today, or the 20 plus breaking news stories that I'm sure will happen today under the Trump administration. So again, please join us every weekday morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. We will see you tomorrow morning bright and early, and I look forward to it already. Have a great day, everyone.